Ave Bookleets. This is Dan, and I am bringing you another unloved classic. And this one is a lot of fun. If I were to tell you that we were going to read a story called Confidence, the Confidence Man, and it was about a riverboat journey. The character's on a riverboat down the Mississippi River from St. Louis to New Orleans. You would probably 90% guess that I was talking about something written by Mark Twain. However, this is actually written by Herbert Melville, who wrote Moby Dick. It's called a masquerade. Now, what is meant by masquerade here? There's a fun little quote that I wanted to share with you where the old plain spoken Missourian is speaking with the confidence man and says, "But is an analogy argument? You are a punster." "Punster, respected sir?" With a look of being aggrieved. "Yes, you pun with ideas as other men may with words." "Oh, well, sir, whoever talks in that strain, whoever has no confidence in human reason, whoever despises human reason, in vain to reason with him. Still, respected sir, altering his air, permit me to hint that, had not the force of analogy moved you somewhat, you would hardly have offered to contemn it." What I wanted to draw out with that is this idea of a pun with ideas. I'm thinking that that might be what Melville was after here. Um, it's also called by many of the critics a satire. This is my first question, or my second, I guess. First being, what's meant by masquerade? My second question will be, what is being satirized if this is a satire? So far as to call it a Menippean satire. This means it's like a satire of ideas as opposed to like a satire of people or places or other things like that. And I guess, maybe you could make a case that capitalism is maybe being satired here, but I don't think so. So if it is a satire, what then is being satired? You may also think when I read you some of these names like John Truman, Charlie Noble, the ship that they're on is called the Fidel, the Faithful. You may think that we are in the land of allegory, and maybe there is a certain sniff of allegory here, but I'm also not convinced that quite fits the bill either. Perhaps we can look a little bit at the sources for this work. Here again, I got a fun quote for you about Chaucer. "As among Chaucer's Canterbury pilgrims, or those Oriental ones crossing the Red Sea towards Mecca in the festival month, there was no lack of variety on board. Natives of all sorts and foreigners, men of business, men of pleasure, parlor men, backwoodsmen, farm hunters, fame hunters, heiress hunters, gold hunters, buffalo hunters, bee hunters, happiness hunters, truth hunters, and still keener hunters after all these hunters. Fine ladies in slippers and moccasin squaws, northern speculators, eastern philosophers, English, Irish, German, Scotch, Danes, Santa Fe traders in striped blankets and Broadway bucks and cravats of cloths of gold, fine-looking Kentucky boatmen and Japanese-looking Mississippi contemplators, Quakers in full drab and United States soldiers in full regimentals, slave, black, mulatto, quadroon, modish young Spanish Creoles and old-fashioned French Jews, Mormons and Papists, Dives and Lazarus, jesters and mourners, teetotalers, convivialists, deacons and blacklegs, hard-shell Baptists and clay eaters, grinning Negroes and Sioux chiefs, solemn as high priests. In short, a piebald parliament, an anarchist klutz congress of all kinds of that multiform pilgrim species man." So this is not a book of fools. This is more like a Noah's Ark for just people. Every kind of people gets in here. Anarchist klutz is a reference that shows up in a lot of Melville's works. It's sort of a freedom fighter, a revolutionary. That's what it is. A revolutionary he uses as both the to paint the high ideals of revolution and also the shortcomings and problems concomitant thereupon. So this is obviously, if this is Chaucer's Pilgrims situation or Decameron type situation, I would ask you then, what plague? What plague are we fleeing? Um, okay, so among the sources, we have mythological. Um, Autolycus is one that's cited. That's a thief, a polymorphing thief that can like turn things invisible. There's a lot of Shakespeare in there, which I'll mainly touch on, and lots of biblical references, those of which I'll leave to you, including perhaps some apocrypha. I think my favorite here is characterizing the Puritans as Malvolio. Malvolio, if you remember, is the stick in the mud sort of valet in the household who falls in love with the heroine, and the drunks of the household have good sport with him by having him intercept or forging a love letter to him from her, asking him to dress in cross garters. That's how I always remember Malvolio, in cross garters, so like a ridiculously flowery, tinsely, tacky, colorful, ridiculous outfit. Anyway, so that's a fun one there. We've got some more we'll talk about Polonius in a bit. There's old coonskins, the Titan of Athens character, the genial misanthrope. There's Colonel Mordock, the Indian hater, who smiles and smiles and is still a villain. These are just some of the various ways in which Melville uses Shakespeare, who he calls a kind of deity. Okay, so we'll jump into the characters now. We've seen a few already. The first set, I noticed a trend, and I want to ask why you think that so many of these are suffer some form of disability. There's the what he calls deaf mute with the slate, right? There's Old Guinea, although there's some people think it's someone in blackface, but anyway, the character named Guinea. There's the soldier, right, with the peg leg. Thomas Fry, the peg leg beggar. Anyway, so what is the purpose of having all these characters with disabilities? And then finally we get to the heart of the matter. You need to picture this book like old Peter Sellers movie, or maybe the youngsters will relate more to Eddie Murphy, in which he plays like all the characters in various fat suits and prosthetic noses and whatnot. So the characters on this boat are avatars of the devil. Although some critics maintain that it's Christ and the devil. I don't see which one of these could possibly be thought of to be Christ-like. John Pistelli does say that you have to think of it like a dialectical devil, like Gotha. That makes sense to me. I could go with that. So we've got these devil characters, but none of the critics agree on which of all these characters is devil, victim. Perhaps some are non-binary. So it's a lot of good fun figuring that out. And I don't think maybe it's one of those undecidable things, which might be why there's so much dissatisfaction with this work by Melville. We'll talk about that at the end. So anyway, we've got, I think I've mentioned most of these guys now. Old Misanthrope there was also supposed to represent Mossy Hawthorne. There is a element of Romana Clef here, or is there? What do you think? Some critics say that they think that when Melville is ridiculing Emerson and Thoreau here in the mystic character of Mark and his disciple Egbert, that's Emerson and Thoreau. Is he mocking them as people or as ideas, as we mentioned earlier? I am not sure. There is a touching scene. Probably my favorite of the chapter is the what I call the In Vino Veritas chapter, where I believe it's the Cosmopolitan and so it's John Truman probably and Charlie Noble, I think, are bonding over wine. And everything's going great, and they discuss a great number of things. Um, and over the black red diabolic wine press. And the next chapter after that is called Metamorphosis, but it's not Ovid. What it is at a certain point, the devil character, as he does in each case, is going to make a touch for money, right? In this case, he uses the friendship. He doesn't, have an alternative like con. He just draws upon the friendship, and immediately the whole friendship is disintegrated, and you went from like my brother, my deepest brother, my beloved best friend, to persona non grata. And I do think that if there is Romana Clef in here, I really feel like that might be a scene from Melville. I visited Melville's house, overlooking the bald of the Berkshires, I guess it would be, where he imagined Moby Dick in the mountains. And it didn't look that poor to me, but I've read since that he was quite poor at various times in need to support his family. And I feel like he put the touch on one of these friends, one of these Hawthorne, these New England types, and they let him down. And so I'm feeling that if that's some Romana Clef settling of scores here, that might be what led to it. But again, that's a theory. What do you think of that theory? Or maybe there's no Romana Clef at all. Okay, now to the capitalism bit. As much as there are characters here, there are also these weird entities. Now, I'm not guessing that at this time the corporate personhood legalities had been worked out, even among shipping magnates of the Boston Brahmins. But there's a great number of weird companies here. There's a personnel company. There's a Black River or Black Rapids Coal Company. These companies change names frequently. The Philosophical Institutions Office, New Jerusalem, this Mormon scheme. There's the Seminole Widows and Orphans Asylum. I mean, these have got names as ominous as the herb doctor's medicines, right? The Samaritan Pain Disorder, or the Omni Balsamic Reinvigorator. I believe it's Guinea here says that charity trusteth no evil. So if there is a satire here, do we think that part of that satire is these entities, all of which are sort of shells for the, for the cons put on by the devil character? But anyway, I found that really interesting. Okay, so what else do we have here? Oh yes, so Melville, Moby Dick, famously full of long digressions or delightful digressions, depending how you find them. I do find the digressions in this book a lot funner than the ones in Moby Dick. But let's say you are of the tribe who believes that Melville needs to cut out a lot of stuff, and that what will be left is really a really good story, whale hunt. Well, what in this work would you cut out? We've got a long sort of critique of the press. We've got the long meditation on the Indian hater, which I think is linked up. I think at a certain point there's this mention of the Lisbon earthquake or Dr. Johnson. I think it was Dr. Johnson. I think this relates to the Lisbon earthquake, which is the problem of evil, where in the Enlightenment time there was a horrible earthquake in Lisbon, and it really shook people's confidence in sort of the goodness of God and that sort of thing. There's a lot of meta fiction discussion in here about Don Quixote, Milton Satan, Hamlet. Probably my favorite is, and it's related to religion, the way the otherworldly is tied to us. It's otherworldly, but it's tied to us, this sort of religion fiction idea. Yeah, so my favorite is, got another quote for you here. To human minds, strong language is always more or less distressing. Besides, Polonius is an old man, as I remember him upon the stage, with snowy locks. Polonius, you'll remember, is famous for giving the advice for going abroad, going off to college. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses itself in friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all else to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. And usually it's that second part about like this above all else, to your own self be true, that is brought out, and people forget that lead-in bit about neither being a borrower nor a lender. But I think that is the reason that Polonius is being talked about here. So he's an old man, as I remember, upon the stage with snowy locks. Now, charity requires that such a figure, think of it how you will, should at least be treated with civility. Moreover, old age is ripeness, and I once heard say, better ripe than raw. And these are the two drunks talking, right, Bonnie? But not better rotten than raw, bringing down his hand with energy on the table. Why, bless me in mild supplies, contemplating his heated comrade. How you fly out against this unfortunate Polonius, a being that never was nor will be. And yet, viewed in a Christian light, he added pensively, I don't know that anger against this man of straw is a whit less wise than anger against the man of flesh. Madness to be mad with anything. That may be or may be not be, returned the other, a little testily perhaps, but I stick to what I said, that it is better to be raw than rotten. And what is to be feared on the head may be known for this, that it is with the best of hearts as with the best of pears, a dangerous experiment to linger too long upon the scene. This did Polonius. And of course, we all remember how he got his curtains from Hamlet. So, what I like about this quote is the part where it's talking about flying off the handle about fictional characters. Because after all, this whole conversation is being held by fictional characters. And in the end, is the devil a straw man? It's certainly not the sort of Daniel Webster type devil, which making a bargain, sort of with you. Dealer devil, I call him, which would be fitting with the typical cards play upon the on the riverboats, but we don't get that scene. So anyway, so those are some of the conversations, the long digressions, if you want to call them that take place on this riverboat. In fact, really, that's all this story is a bunch of these long conversations. So, and various people who do or don't bite on the cons. The man who eventually ends up buying the cure from the herb doctor, or the person who gets mad at someone because they don't donate, and then they give money, and then that opens them up to getting hit up by lots more people asking for money. Yeah, that's basically what this story is all about. So if you're going to cut those digressions, which would you cut? Finally, style. I just wanted to read you a tiny bit of dialogue, which I thought was really fun, since much of this, of course, is in dialogue. So the one asks the other, you're an abolitionist, ain't you? As to that, I cannot so readily answer. This is a cosmopolitan answering. As to that, I cannot so readily answer. And by the way, another question, is this cosmopolitan or this devil a being of light, an iblis? Or is this devil how should we put it? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. Okay. So, you're an abolitionist, aren't you? As to that, I cannot so readily answer. If by abolitionist you mean a zealot, I am none. But if you mean a man who, being a man, feels for all men, slaves included, and by any lawful act opposed to nobody's interest, and therefore, rousing nobody's enmity, would willingly abolish suffering, supposing it, in its degree to exist, from among mankind, irrespective of color, then am I what you say. Picked and prudent sentiments, you are the moderate man, the invaluable understrapper of the wicked man. You, the moderate man, may be used for wrong, but are useless for right. So whether this is a fallen angel or not, I do believe that in this dialogue we can clearly say that at least for now, this polyphenous sort of devil demon character is indeed a devil's advocate. That's what I would say, that this is a great example of some devil's advocacy. Not even sure at the end if they are or not an abolitionist after all of that. And this quote also, I ask you to parse this for me. Tell me what it means. I have almost no idea. For a moist rogue may tickle the midriff, while a dry worldling may but wrinkle the spleen. What do we make of that, BookTube? I mean, spleen was a kind of big concept in the mid sort of 1800s with, the Romantics, young Werther, all these idle young men, committing suicide, sort of just vague malaise. I don't know. And of course, famously, Baudelaire talked about the spleen. So anyway, so that's the style. I think you've got a good feel for the style now. What do we think of that? How would you label it? In our conclusion, they're sort of talking theology, talking Bible, sleep talking, someone cries out in the dark. Too good to be true, cries out someone else. And it ends with something further follow. But indeed it does not, because this is the last thing Melville wrote in his life. Now, Billy Budd was published after, posthumously, I believe. And in terms of its place in his work, I think we can say this is the anti-Billy Budd, right? Obviously, there's a lot in common with Moby Dick being a ship voyage. But Billy Budd is, he is all about his stuttering man. He couldn't say it with words, so he said it with his fists. Whereas this is all about talk, 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 talk. There is, of course, the minstrel racism here from, like, Benito Serrano. There's the critiques of the inconstancy of character from, like, Pierre. But, Melville famously said, why do my characters have to be constant when humans are not? And maybe this is indeed, and that wasn't one of, Aristotle's unities either, right? There was no unity of character. So perhaps this is why he invented a poly character, a many-headed devil. So that's how I relate to a few of the works. How do you think it relates to Moby Dick, the most famous? Why do you think critics so disliked or ignored this work? I have a couple suspicions, but I love it. I would have rather read this in high school, I think, than Moby Dick, for sure. And this is the final citation. This seems to be the pull-out quote that most of the critics came up with from this work. And I want you to tell me what you make of it and why you think this, of all the quotes, is the one that they pulled out. It's not the one I would have pulled out from this work. Money, you think, is the sole motive to pains and hazard, deception and deviltry in this world. How much money did the devil make by gulling Eve? Well, none. Anyway, so that's The Confidence Man by Herman Melville. Check it out. Read it. It's a lot of fun. And if you are inspired to answer any of these questions, either in the comments or ideally with a video of your own, I'll certainly link you to this one, and we can have a fun back and forth of videos talking about Melville's The Confidence Man. Until next time.